Good afternoon, my name is Paul Clark. I'm the Managing Director of a company called Rural Energy. We've been working in the biomass industry for the past 12 years. Essentially, we've got two parts to our business. We're a project delivery company, so for large commercial and industrial biomass projects, we do turnkey solutions. And for smaller projects under 500 kilowatts, we run a distribution arm where we distribute biomass boiler products to our network of installers across the country. It's a very basic outline of what we do. I'm here to talk to you today about what impact the RHI have on the non-domestic biomass market. It's quite a big subject. I'm not going to look at the policy of the RHI really at all, because I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people here over these day or so to fill you in on that detail. So I'm going to look at it from a practical point of view, from us as an installer and as a distribution company. How does it impact our business and the biomass market in general? So the RHI, I won't be the first to tell you, it is a world first, and I guess the headline impact is that it's the government mechanism for bringing biomass into the mainstream. So if you look across Europe, Austria, Germany, Scandinavia, biomass is the mainstream heating technology. It's a normal way of heating buildings. Not the only way, but one of the ways. In the UK, it's been very, very niche, and the RHI is the mechanism for bringing it into the open, which is fantastic. So, looking at the detail of the impact, these are sort of the headline items that I'm going to talk about. Boiler sizing. You just heard about the three tariff rates for biomass. Small biomass, which is up to 200 kilowatts, medium biomass for between 200 and 1,000 kilowatts, and large biomass, which is over 1,000. And there's a different value of tariff depending on where you sit. And the effect that that's having is that customers, owners are trying to optimise the income that they get from the RHI by sizing their biomass boiler around the tariff, really, rather than around exactly what is precisely required for their building. So if the building peak load is, for instance, 300 kilowatts, that will push them into the medium biomass tariff. Whereas actually, if they install the boiler, which is a 199 kilowatt, for example, then that will push them into the lower tariff, which is a much higher value. So we're seeing in the market that there's many boilers we're selling at 199 kilowatt and 999 kilowatt in order for the owner to optimise their income. Is that a problem? We don't think so. You're not going to oversize the biomass boiler because just by the very nature of how biomass heat works, if you only need 300 kilowatts, you wouldn't put a 500 kilowatt boiler in just to get a bit more RHI, because you're not going to be able to use that heat in your building. So, and it's going to cost you more money to install that large boiler. So you're not going to oversize it, so that's not going to be really an issue. But some people will be undersizing their biomass boiler in order to make best use of the tariffs. Is that a problem? That's not really a problem either. Biomass boilers like to be run continually. They like to be run they don't like to cycle on and off. So to have a boiler that's slightly undersized is actually a good thing for the building and a good thing for the boiler itself. When a boiler is cycling, then it creates more emissions and actually has more wear and tear on the product. So to slightly undersize it is actually a good thing anyway. The other impact the RHI is having on the biomass sector as a whole is that it's professionalising the whole industry. So in these three areas that I've listed here, so the biomass sustainability criteria coming out later this year, whereby fuel suppliers will be having to accredit themselves to a certain standard in order to be on an accredited list of fuel suppliers, which is helping to really make the whole fuel supply industry professional and raise the game of producing quality fuels for the boilers, which is great from our point of view because we want our boilers to receive fuels which are the right quality and what the customer is asking for. And the RHI is really giving the confidence to fuel suppliers that there is an industry here, it is worth investing, it is worth putting the infrastructure in place to enable you to actually build your business, your fuel supply business, which is great. And the questions that we get asked about fuel generally, is there enough of it in the UK? Where can I get it from? And should we use pellets? Right? respect? Well, the sustainability of fuel supply chain is going to really sort out the last two. So where can I get it from? There'll be a list of accredited suppliers. That's going to be very, very helpful for consumers to understand where can they get their fuel from. Are the chips always wet? No, they're not. As long as the fuel supplier is providing, a quality product and to the right specification, and they're accredited and they're audited, then if they say they're going to be supplying dry wood chips to suit that particular boiler, then that's what they'll be doing. The question of resources is not really something that the RHI is going to sort out. But as the market increases in size, more fuel suppliers will come into the industry, and in order to meet that demand. The second one there, RHI emission certificates and air quality. So in the 24th of September last year, the RHI emission certificates became mandatory. If you wanted to apply for a biomass boiler RHI, then you needed to provide an emission certificate to suit the boiler that you're installing in your building. What that means is that the boiler needs to produce a certain limit of the NOx and the particulates that it will be producing. So that will have the effect of essentially limiting the emissions from biomass boilers across the country. And the UK has got an issue with air quality, mainly around towns and cities, but the levels of NOx and particulates are higher than is required by the EU. So the government's got some work to do in order to get those numbers down. Biomass boilers don't help because they do produce some emissions, so it's right that there is a scheme in place in order to limit it. The effect on the market would be the lower quality, less sophisticated products will not be able to meet those emission limits, so therefore they won't be able to be installed in the UK if the customer wants to obtain the RHI, which again is right. If the government's going to be paying money out to people for a biomass boiler, then it needs to be in line with their emission criteria. I've put this installer accreditation on there, but currently there is no installer accreditation for commercial biomass boiler installers. There's gas safe for gas installers, Offtech for boiler installers, but nothing for biomass commercial installers, which is on there really as a bit of a, we need to do this. I think we need to have a look as an industry at pushing for some kind of installer accreditation for biomass boiler installers, because there's many areas, safety issues with biomass that need to be, we need to make sure are covered during the installation. And us as a company, we have our own training program that we take our installers through, but there's no national scheme to sign off installers. So consumers don't know who they're buying from, essentially, unless they're buying from, well, I guess they would buy from a larger company to give them that comfort. But really, we do need an installer accreditation scheme. The last two areas I'm going to talk about are the take-up of the RHI, and then I'm going to go through some case studies I thought it might be helpful to outline what effect on a particular job does the RHI have. I'm not going to talk too much about this one because these are sort of object numbers, and there's plenty of object people talking here today. But a couple of things to point out really. The red line is the number of applications for biomass month on month, and you can see that it is growing. So the RHI is having a direct effect. We've been around long enough to know what life is like without subsidies and without the RHI, and it's the growth that we're seeing at the moment is very, very encouraging. I don't think that the growth will ever get to the dizzy heights of what happened in the solar PV world, because there's so many sort of complexities around installing biomass that you just don't have with solar. Solar has its own complexities, but biomass is, I think it's just that much more complex, and there'll be less entrants coming into the market. The spike on the red is I think just before the RHI emission certificates became mandatory, so everybody got their installation or their application in quick before they had to apply for that. And the drop in the green line is the number of actual accreditations that signed off applications. That's where there was a stop put on the applications due to the regulations being misdrafted, which has been sorted out now, so that should pick up again. So I'm just going to go through a number of case studies. This is I'm trying to keep them reasonably generic, so they're not particular to any project, but they are real projects that we have done. So this is a small primary school. We installed a packaged smart room or heat pump with a length of district heating pipe, taking the energy or the heat from the packaged smart room to the school. It was a sort of plastic 1950s primary school. Quite a small biomass boiler running on wood chip, and the fuel alongside, the existing fuel alongside was made as gas. So we were kind of up against it cost-wise, because chip systems tend to be more expensive, quite a bit more expensive than pellet systems. And when you're trying to compete with mains gas, you're probably the least, because gas is very cheap. But the local authority who contracted us to install it wanted to try and get some pops of biomass installations in their area, and they wanted also to support the wood fuel industry within their region, which is why they went for the chip system as opposed to a wood pellet system. Wood chips really need to be delivered within a sort of 30-40 mile radius if it's to a small installation. So looking at the numbers, in red I've just done a comparison with what it would look like if we installed the pellet system here instead. So you can see the difference between chip and pellet. So I won't go into all the numbers there, but essentially it gives a 13-year payback on the chips and a 12-year payback on the pellet. You can see the difference in cost there between the pellet and the chip. Part of that is because the chip system, or the pellet system rather, could be located much closer to the school than the chip system because of the complexities around delivering chips. So it's 13 years is quite a long time for anyone to invest in, but this is it was a bit of a case study that the local authority wanted to push forward. So not great on the capital front. Chips are about the same price as gas, and without the RHI giving it a payback, there would not be a cost saving there at all. So before the RHI, this is a project that we would, if we had the inquiry, we would look at it and not really give it much time, and we just knew it would go ahead. The next case study is a new build apartment block. It's actually a mini district heating scheme, so a housing estate. It's a 150 kilowatt pellet boiler installed and a megawatt gas boiler, heating the building through district heating pipes. Again, mains gas. Because it's new build, the driver here was not the RHI, it was a planning requirement to have a renewable resource on site, generated on site. So again, it wasn't done on a financial basis, but really on a planning basis. And we're pitching pellets, which is quite expensive fuel against gas, which is very cheap fuel. So again, we've got a very long payback. And this is probably a project before the RHI that we would still do and still have inquiries for, because it is a planning requirement, but not because there's an economic argument for doing it. So again, pellets are more expensive than gas. It's a much more expensive installation, and the fuel's more expensive. Without the RHI, it just wouldn't happen. This case study is a country hotel spa, and this is sort of a typical project that we would do pre-RHI. There's a swimming pool within the hotel, and obviously a lot of heat is needed for the swimming pool and also the spa. There's an energy sector that's built with a fair amount of district heat pipe. Quite an old building, 600 kilowatt chip boiler, and a 1.2 megawatt oil boiler. So we've got quite a low cost biomass fuel with chips, and quite a very expensive fossil fuel, which is replacing oil. Running quite hard, 30% duty. This gives a 3.5-year payback using the savings you made from switching from oil to chip, and also the income you get from the biomass. So fantastic returns. And 3.5 years is something that any sort of FD financial director would be interested in looking at from the investment point of view. And the owners of this hotel actually live in Kuwait, so they're not really interested in what's happening on the ground. They're interested in the numbers. Without the RHI, it would push the payback from 3.5 years up to 7 years, which for a green thinking owner of a hotel, that may well be acceptable. but 7 years is still quite a long payback for just a straight financial investment. The property sector seems to be very buoyant at the moment in biomass. There's a number of reasons for that. One is the need cost of heat throughout the whole year, and also there's slightly easier planning restrictions around installing new buildings for housing the biomass boilers. So this case study looks at a 150 kilowatt wood pellet boiler against an existing 200 kilowatt LPG boiler. So the way that poultry sheds are heated is typically they have LPG burners inside the sheds which are feeding the heat and the products of combustion directly into the poultry shed. So it's pumping water and CO2 directly into the shed. And because of the need to maintain the air quality inside the shed for the birds, and they need to ventilate quite frequently to get rid of that water and that moisture, and also to get rid of that CO2. So if you put in a biomass boiler, then you can switch it to what's called a dry heat system, where you're running the heat through heat exchangers, so you're not putting that extra water and you're not putting that extra CO2 into the shed, which means you ventilate less and you need less heat. It also means there's less humidity in the shed, which means that actually the birds do grow quicker, which means that they can turn around their crop cycles quicker. So just looking at the biomass element, it's a 4.5 year payback, 25% IRR, based on a single heat pod, single package marble pellets, which is a fantastic achievement, because pellets are quite an expensive steel product. Without the RHI, pellets are slightly more expensive than LPG, but the switch to a dry heat gives as good a savings as the RHI. And customers, poultry farmers have been switching to dry heat systems even without the RHI. So the RHI is really the icing on the cake for this particular industry. This case study is a larger poultry project. So there's 9 sheds altogether in the plan. The first phase is 6 sheds. And we've installed a 995 kilowatt, so you can see it's right up to the top deck of the second tariff, and there's a 1.2 megawatt LPG backup boiler. So the energy sector is delivering the heat to the different poultry sheds via district heating scheme, and there's enough capacity in the biomass boiler to serve 3 new sheds which are due to be built online. It's slightly oversized for the 6 sheds. 995 is. So we have a 6.5 year payback on a £600,000 capital cost investment. There's some savings on the running costs, switching from chip to LPG, and a large £65,000 income from the RHI. So I think what I'm trying to get across is there's certain projects which work and certain projects which don't. The RHI is not silver bullet for making any project financially viable. There's still some that are not financially viable even with the RHI. It really needs to be taken on a case-by-case basis. And again, the switch to dry heat is further saving on top of that, which is obtained from the RHI. And the last case study here is a practice plant room into a large primary school. It's a pellet system, so the pellet store is integral to the enclosure, to the box. It's got a boiler and the pellet store together. And I've modeled two systems. I've modeled it running where the existing fuel is gas, and I've also modeled it running where the existing fuel is heating oil. So it's a 199 kilowatt boiler. The fossil fuel boiler that's there at the moment is a 300 kilowatt system. But because of the modifications and improvements that's been done to the school since it was built, it means that the actual heat demand is a fair bit lower than 300 kilowatt. Quite often we find that gas boilers are a little bit oversized anyway. So for the pellet stroke gas system, we've got a 7.5 year payback, and pellet against oil, 4.5 year payback. So it's a significant difference. Before the RHI, we would be predominantly wholly focused on either customers who are on heating oil or LPG, or new build properties where there was a planning requirement for renewable energy. What the RHI has done is basically just opened it out completely so that we're not restricted to certain sectors of the market. I've put on the slides the input data for the numbers, just in case if anybody wants to copy the slides, they've got the actual data. I guess I've got a couple of conclusions. As I said, the RHI really is the mechanism for moving biomass into the mainstream. It's professionalising with the industry, the fuel supply, the products and the installers, and it's opening it up so you don't have to be necessarily very green thinking to invest in biomass. It is actually an economically viable thing to do. And the last point, which I haven't really mentioned, is that there are a lot of installations in the past where they were installed in order to get the planning tick, but then probably never used. What the RHI is going to do, because it's based on a usage tariff, the more you use it, the more you get paid. It would ensure that people do actually keep the biomass boards on, and the RHI is there to provide the additional funds that are needed to cover the higher cost of maintenance and the higher cost of the fuel. So thanks very much for your time.